And we are off. Hey, gang, welcome back. Been a while. I missed you guys. I miss all of you guys. Been too long. I've been out and about. That's why there hasn't been a recent episode of the All Dolphins podcast. But we're doing one today on this Monday, June 16th, joined by Miami Dolphins on the side deputy editor, Dante Colonelli. What up, Dante?
I am doing good. How's your trip? Let's start there. How are we doing?
It's been very, very, very enjoyable so far. I mean, it's about seeing family. Also had a little bit of a ceremony on Saturday to pay our final respects to my parents. We actually planted a tree and spread their ashes in the area where they planted the tree. So, and it was very, very nice. Nice bonding with the fam out and about. So far, so good. And I'll be here for a couple more days and then back to good old FLA later in the week. So,
There
we're
we
not here
go.
to talk. We're not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about the Dolphins, who wrapped up their offseason program on Wednesday. They had a practice scheduled for Thursday. It turned into a walkthrough. After leaving Thursday morning, I didn't miss any of the practices. As it turned out, we wound up the media being privy to seeing 4 open practices. And I will tell you very briefly what I saw in terms of players who stood out. More importantly, we'll be discussing the latest on Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, who are the 3 main guys who have been in the news for the Dolphins so far this offseason. We'll start backwards. The latest probably would be involving Jalen Ramsey and trade speculation, hypotheticals going all over the place. How do we like this one here? The latest one is Jalen Ramsey to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 2026 fifth-round pick. How do we like that one, Dante?
I mean, I think it's probably as good as you're gonna get from the Dolphins' perspective. I don't know. Like maybe they could get a fourth from somebody, but I think that fourth to fifth round range is probably what they're gonna get in return for Jalen Ramsey. I think the more interesting question is whether or not Jalen Ramsey would co-sign a deal to Las Vegas. You have to think that this is a player who wants to chase titles this upcoming season. And I think the Raiders did a lot of good things this offseason. I think they're going to be better with Jonnu Smith. They took Ashton Genty at the top. They hired Pete Carroll. It's a nice core. They're not a bad football team by any stretch of the imagination, but I have a hard time thinking that they're going to get out of the AFC West and then win multiple playoff games on the road. That's currently their path. And obviously Jalen Ramsey could help them do that. But if I'm Jalen Ramsey, I mean, I'd rather wait to go to the Rams or, as funny as this sounds, I would tell you the Raiders are better than the Panthers in a vacuum, but the Panthers play in the NFC South, which might be the most winnable division in the sport. I know the Buccaneers have dominated that division before, but you can get over the hump on the Buccaneers. They're a good team too, but you can. And so I think that's the more interesting question. The Raiders have plenty of cap space. There's no doubt Pete Carroll would love somebody like Jalen Ramsey. We all know how much he loves defensive backs, especially those with personalities. Pete Carroll lives for those types of players. That's how he kind of made his living in Seattle, frankly. And so I think from a culture perspective, it's a good fit. I don't know if Jalen Ramsey would want to go to the Raiders. That would be my only question.
Yeah. And this is the part where I have to chime in and answer the question that I know is coming from some Dolphin fans to that question. Like, well, what the hell is Jalen Ramsey? Why does he have any say in this? He's under contract. And if the Dolphins trade him, then he's under contract with the Raiders. Well, again, part of the issue is having an unhappy Jalen Ramsey on your roster or any high-profile veteran like that is counterproductive. So if the Raiders make the trade and Jalen Ramsey doesn't want to go to Vegas, they got problems. It makes no sense to make the trade. So they want him to be on board. It doesn't make sense for a trade to be consummated regarding Jalen Ramsey if he's not on board with the destination, which was the same deal when he was with the Rams and they were looking to move him. He kind of sort of directed his way to the Dolphins, which was a favored destination. And now 2 years later, he wants out. And the Dolphins, by excusing him from the mandatory minicamp, kind of tell you they're over it as well. So I can see it. The one part of the equation that wasn't addressed in that report, the latest hypothetical, and I'm assuming by not including it means then the Raiders will be on the hook for all of Ramsey's compensation for 2025, which is highlighted by a $19 million bonus, guaranteed bonus, which he gets by week 1. And if that's the case, if the Raiders are willing to take on all of that, then that's why you're not getting anything more than a fifth for Ramsey. And then the cat and mouse game is where the Dolphins give us more, and the Raiders will be like, well, pay some of his money, and then maybe you make the compensation a little bit higher by taking on money, which is kind of distasteful. If I'm an organization, like, I'm going to pay some of your salary to accommodate your desire to leave us. I mean, that's
tough.
harsh.
It's tough, but I think in this scenario, I think it's the cost of doing business. If I'm a team acquiring Jalen Ramsey, I'm not acquiring Jalen Ramsey if I have to pay him $21 million this upcoming year. And, he's not, I don't think he has any guaranteed money after this off the top of my head. So, it's not the worst contract in the world, but this is a corner who is on the wrong side of 30. He was still good last year, but it was not his best season. It was clearly like a step down from where you'd expect all pro Jalen Ramsey to be, right? Like, it was not an all pro caliber campaign from him last year. Like, it's a tough situation for the Dolphins to pull out something that feels like a genuine win. It doesn't feel like there's any version of this where it's like, dude, the Dolphins did a great job. We're all good. We got a great trade package for Jalen Ramsey. The team's better. There's no money problem. Like, they are going to have to pay, I think, to get Ramsey off the team because, any contending team probably isn't going to have a ton of cap space. Like, teams can create cap space for the year at hand at will. But, if Ramsey really wants to go to a contender, they're probably not going to have a ton of cap space. I think the Rams have like 19 million off the top of my head. So like the Dolphins are going to have to pay. They just are if they want anything back. I really think that that's unfortunately the cost of business.
No, and you make a good point that at this moment, it's basically chances are it's going to be a losing proposition, this trade for the Dolphins, regardless. It's how minimal the loss can they make it. And that's, unfortunately, that's what it is. Let's move on to Tyreek Hill, who I'm going to repeat for the 18th time is not getting traded unless I'm massively mistaken, because it makes zero sense. And he did his race on Friday of the 13th, just as he said he was going to. Looked like, I don't know exactly the event that he participated in, but it was a full meet with 8 racers, 100-meter race. He won it. His time doesn't compare very well to that of Noah Lyles, but the earlier indications where they were supposed to race over 60 yards, I believe it was, or 60 meters. So it's not the same thing. He's going to get his butt kicked regardless. I had said in a podcast last week with Perk that to me would show such a great sign of maturity for Tyreek to put out a tweet on Friday saying, you know what, as much as I'd like to do this race, I'm going to devote my entire focus from this point forth, as I have all off season, on being as prepared as possibly can be for the start of training camp so I can make this 2025 season for the Dolphins a memorable one for the team and for myself. That didn't happen. It's not a huge deal that it didn't happen. It just would have been, I don't know if I'm living in fantasy land, but that to me, that would have been great. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was not expecting Tyreek to send that message, right? Like I think at a certain point, I'm at the point now where it's like, look, Tyreek is who he is. And like, honestly, I don't think the race is like a big deal. And this is not important at all, but like the time that he ran at 31 years old was like wildly impressive. Like he might have qualified for the Paris Olympics if he had done that during that qualifier round. I saw that. And so I think it's wildly impressive that he was able to pull that time off and win that race. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's early in the offseason. Everyone's going to say the right things, do the right things. We're not going to know if the culture is different until they actually hit adversity. I understand all that, but like, look, Tyreek Hill is ahead of schedule, catching passes already. He was at mandatory minicamp. Everyone who's talked about him has had a positive review. Take those with a grain of salt. I completely agree with that. But like, I don't know. He is who he is. He's going to be doing stuff off the field. He's going to be taking shots at Noah Lyles. Like, that's who Tyreek Hill is. That's who he was when he had 1,400 yards. And that's who he is when he had, whatever he had last year. Was it like 800, 900-ish yards? He fell just short of 1,000, if I remember correctly. So like, that's who he is. That's what you're getting. That's a part of the Tyreek Hill experience. I don't think it's that big of a deal. But yeah, would it have been nice for him to just say, no, I'm all in on the offseason. I'm not worried about sprinting? Sure. Yeah, it would have been nice, but not what I was expecting at all.
No, same here. I wasn't expecting. And the other part of it is, if that's the biggest headlines he makes all off season, it's the deal with the race. Sign me up.
Yeah.
That would be fine. And again, I still see. I think it might have been Pro Football Talk, the last outlet to suggest that maybe Tyreek was behaving to set himself up for a trade. Again, if the Dolphins trade Tyreek Hill, you're telling your fans basically we are punting, kicking off, doing everything to the 2025 season, because any scenario where the Dolphins return to the playoffs, to me, involves Tyreek Hill having a big season. And this is why when he talks about having 2,000 yards, and I see some fans going nuts like, stop being so selfish. Well, to me, if the Tyreek Hill gets 2,000 yards, the Dolphins are a lot closer to the playoffs than even if they spread the wealth around, because he's the one who's going to make the most dynamic plays. Speaking of dynamic plays, Jonnu Smith's the one guy on the roster at tight end where they have a lot of players, but he's the one guy there who can make explosive plays or more explosive plays than you usually get from a tight end. And that, to me, would be the cost if the Dolphins wind up moving from him. And the latest, apparently, is Drew Rosenhaus said nothing has changed, still a fluid situation. Translation, he still wants more money than the Dolphins are willing to give him. And the other issue here, and I see Dolphin fans again, and no offense, but sometimes and then it's not just Dolphin fans, sometimes it's Dolphins fans websites. You're writing stories. The Dolphins are stupid if they don't pay Jonnu Smith. Okay, that's perfectly fine. If you want to say that he's entitled to a raise after what he did last year, outperforming his contract, cool. Does that mean the Dolphins have to pay him whatever he wants, no matter how out of whack it is for a tight end and for his role on the team? This is where we need to apply nuance. It's just too easy to say Dolphins have to pay him.
I agree. I think we talked about this on the show the last time I was on. Like, there is a number that sits in my head. I think it's roughly somewhere between 8 and 9 million. Like, that's what I'd be willing to pay him. And again, like, that doesn't sound like a ton. That's not going to push him into top 10 tight end territory. But if I pay him $9 million this year, that's doubling what he was going to make, right? Like, I've given him a 50% raise, man. That's a big raise. Like, that's not a small raise. And, I'm not saying that Jonnu Smith wouldn't get more on the open market. I'm not saying that Jonnu Smith doesn't. Maybe he does. Maybe he deserves more than that. Maybe he does. You could argue that. And I'm sure Drew Rosenhaus is, because that's his job. But, like, if you're the Dolphins, I don't have any desire to pay Jonnu Smith $12 million a year, make him one of the top 10 highest paid tight ends in the sport, because I think if you push that contract there, you're then incentivized to make that an extension and not just a 1-year raise. I think the more that you give him in AAV, that you are incentivized to push that out further. And frankly, I have no desire in that. I don't think the Dolphins do either. I think that's where the disconnect is, right? Like, Jonnu Smith probably wants a number that makes him a top 10 highest paid tight end, which he produced like last year. We can be honest about that. But if I'm the Dolphins, I don't want to extend a player of his age and his role. And I really don't think he was going to be in their plans past this season, no matter what, whether he plays on the contract or they trade him or whatever. Because if he was, they would just pay him. And this wouldn't be a problem, right? Like, they would just pay him and that'd be the end of it. They extended Jonnu Smith. Sure. I don't think that they view him as the long-term tight end. So yeah, we're going to flip him to, the hypotheticals or Pittsburgh for a late round pick. And that's going to be it. I don't think you just hand your checkbook to Jonnu Smith. I think that there's very few players that you should do that for in general. And as much as I like Jonnu as a dude, and he seems like a really good locker room presence, and the team seems to really like him, and he's a great fit in the offense, you don't just hand him the checkbook. You can't. It's just not. I think he deserves a raise. I think the Dolphins should give him one. But if he wants some, crazy 2-3 year extension that makes him a top 10 highest paid tight end, Miami's not in a position to give him that contract.
No, I agree. And this is why I have said that, to me, what makes sense is a contract like the one they gave to Raheem Mostert in the 2024 offseason. Just nice signing bonus. And then there's no guaranteed salary in the second year. And if Jonnu Smith has another really good year and the Dolphins want to keep him beyond 2025, then they revisit it. If not, you part ways. And Jonnu got a nice chunk of change with a signing bonus as an attaboy for his 2024 season. And the next question we always have to ask Jonnu, by the way, played at his collegiately at the same school I attended, Florida International University, one of the few, the proud. Him, Tahir Tart, T.Y. Hilton, but there's not a long list. So he's one of the all-time greats from that school. But the thing is, when the Dolphins signed him, he had been released by the Atlanta Falcons. Why? Because Arthur Smith had been their OC and was a big proponent of – either their OC or their head coach. I forget. I think it was their
coach. Yeah,
he was the head coach, right? Okay, yeah. He was a big proponent of 2 tight end sets. And then he moves on. He gets replaced by Raheem Morris, moves on to the Steelers, and then the new OC is not a proponent of 2 tight end sets as a predominant feature of the offense. So he's got Kyle Pitts there. So they released Jonnu Smith, and the Dolphins got him for 2 years at a total of $8 million, which tells you that teams were not necessarily banging the door for his services. Now, has he gotten that much better in 1 year, or is it just that he was focused in the offense in part because the Dolphins couldn't push the ball downfield for whatever reason, whether it's too high safeties or a reluctance to it or the pass protection because we have to dump on the offensive line? That's a must in every episode or every discussion about the Dolphin offense. Or whatever reason, he wound up being the beneficiary and got big numbers. And as I said, if he leaves, Dolphins have capable pass-catching tight ends. I think Tanner Conner, who again is having had a good showing in the offseason program, and I'll get to that a little bit later. The difference that you're not going to have is the ability to turn a 2-yard catch into a 20-yard catch. Or I remember the one against the Rams where it should have been a 15-yard catch and wound up being a 33-yard catch because he bowled over a defender and wound up going all the way to the 1-yard line. How much value is there in that? Not $12 million annually would be my answer to that.
No, I would agree. I think you can find other players to catch screens and whatnot. I think one of the more interesting things, we did a write-up on SI on Dolphins a couple of weeks ago, and I took a look at where Jonnu Smith's targets are coming from, and a quarter of them are behind the line of scrimmage. I can replace, the Dolphins have infinite players who I can throw screens to. That's kind of the whole shtick with having guys who run 4-2 all over the field. There are plenty of dudes who can take those targets. So I think Jonnu is the prototype, right? I don't think the Dolphins are going to find someone better for his role, but he is a replaceable level player. This is not an irreplaceable player, I think there's a lot of good arguments for why Tyreek Hill maybe should get traded, even though he won't get traded, right? You can argue it's better for the future, blah, blah, blah. But the Tyreek Hill is irreplaceable. You know what I mean? In what he does, you have to change the entire offense if you trade Tyreek Hill. My point being is that even though Jonnu Smith was really good last year and really productive and a big part of the offense, you don't need to change the offense if you trade Jonnu Smith. And I think that's kind of the difference in players that you would be more willing to invest in long-term versus a player who you're just trying to work something out for the 2025 season. And Hill's a bad example because there's a lot of off-the-field stuff with him, right, that filters into that conversation. My point is that you have to decide for certain players who to build your offense around. Jonnu is a great cog in the machine, but he is not going to be the player that churns the gears for you. He's good at what he does, but you can find other people who do what he does, maybe just not quite as good.
Correct. And I agree. And then to me, if the Dolphin offense is to be what the team wants it to be, you look at the most important players, it's Tua, Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, maybe make the argument, maybe Jalen Wright, and then you get to Jonnu. I think if those other 4 players perform, or was it 5 players perform, Jonnu or no Jonnu, I think the offense can be good. Okay, we mentioned Tanner Conner, and this is where I want to go back. So if I see off-season program superlatives, best performers, and all that, I want to preface it with the major caveat. First of all, is the Dolphins wound up doing 5 OTA practices, including No, sorry. 6 OTA practices plus 2 mini camp practices. If I do my math very quickly, that would be 8. We saw 4 of them, so half of them. Before that, in the phase 2, which were not OTAs, did not involve team versus team. There was practice as well. There's only so much we can glean. We should not be making any bold declarations about the 2025 roster based on what we saw in the offseason. It's a snippet. What kind of shape does the guy look like? How well is he moving? Is there anything that stands out one way or the other in terms of he's catching the ball? The offensive line, defensive line stuff when they do 11 on 11. They're trying, but they're not. It's not in pads. So, again, take everything that's being said here with that as a background. So players, I would say, to me, looked good. And there are certain players who will always look good in those settings. Like when I hear Tua like ripping it up in 7-on-7, Tua's going to rip it up in 7-on-7. Okay, because he's a very accurate quarterback. And if he has time with the field spread out like that, his accuracy is going to prevail, and he's going to make his throws. So, and generally speaking, in 11 on 11, in a practice setting, more often than not, it's going to look good. He had a couple of practices where, even the practice where he finished with the much discussed Malik Washington dime, which I said was a great throw. I don't know if I think I saw somebody mention perfect throw and all that. To me, it was like, well, okay, whatever. But it was a great throw. In that practice, the offense didn't do a ton. The first team offense, 11 on 11 in terms of completions and all that. So having said all that as a caveat, overall thoughts, Zach Wilson's going to be the number 2 coach. There's no signs I've seen, again, in the limited viewing I had of Quinn Ewers to suggest that he's anywhere near capable of surpassing Zach Wilson. And Zach Wilson's arm talent is very, very, very obvious. And then he indicated to us in his media session that it's been pounded into him. Throw the ball early, throw the ball early, throw the ball early. And if you remember him at this time with the Jets, that ain't exactly what this forte was. In fact, it was quite the opposite. Am I right?
Yeah. No, he's Zach Wilson was addicted to holding the football. It was he took, I think he was either like the third or most sacked quarterback in the entire NFL over his starting campaign with the Jets. And like, yes, the offensive line deserves some blame for that. Yeah, the Jets had some bad play callers during that time, but like, you watch the Zach Wilson tape, dude just refuses to throw the football sometimes. Like he's just standing there holding it, running around like a chicken with his head cut off. Like, so I took that quote as like a really good sign, even though I didn't believe him that he's never heard that before. It's irrelevant, right? Like the point is that they're trying to get the ball out of his hands quicker, and he's clearly focused on that. So I took that as a really good sign, regardless of whatever interceptions he threw in OTAs or whatever. I don't really care about that stuff. I thought what he said and what the Dolphins are trying to get him to do was a really good sign. And I would imagine you agree with that.
No, I totally agree with that. And he made the point, the Dolphin offense, this is Zach Wilson talking, the Dolphin offense is predicated upon the quarterback throwing to a spot with the trust that his receiver is going to be there, which is why when Tua's doing it, with thousands and thousands of reps with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, sometimes it looks like a complete machine because Tua's throwing the ball very quickly because he knows Tyreek's going to be at that exact spot, and lo and behold, Tyreek is at the exact spot. Zach Wilson is new to the offense, and then this is where when you have Tyler Huntley joining in after being signed off the Baltimore Ravens practice squad in September, and you can't run that system. He does not have the timing with those receivers. And Zach Wilson, what he's coming from is basically what he wanted to do was let me spot a guy who's even slightly open because I have the arm strength to get it there. Well, in the Dolphin, that's not how the Dolphin scheme operates. And there's merit to that because when it works well, it works really, really well. It makes the Dolphins really difficult to stop. But when there's either disruption to the route or tighter coverage, it can go astray, which is what the Dolphins have run into when the offense stops clicking and churning the way it does. Running backs, they all look good. There's not one of them who didn't show like nice burst running through a hole. It's not like they're getting pounded by linebackers coming up the middle, though, but they all look. Jalen Wright is cut like nobody's business, and it was moving very, very well. Spoiler alert, Devon Achane is fast. Ollie Gordon looked Were you aware of that, Dante?
No, I had no idea Devon Achane was
Oh,
fast. That's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad I can, and and I still made you deputy editor of Miami Dolphins on SI,
How about
despite the
that?
fact you didn't know that. See, how's that? That's the amount of faith I have and confidence I have in you. And the two guys who are going to be battling for snaps in short yardage and as complementaries to Achane and Jalen Wright, Ali Gordon, the 6th-round pick, and Alexander Madison, the veteran free agent. They both look good. They both run really well. They both look like, really ready to play. So the running back room should be in good shape, assuming the blocking is there. At tight end, Tanner Connor is not something we haven't seen before. Looked really good. The question is, can he carry that over into the regular season? And this is where I caution. This is not the first time we've heard this. He does look significantly bigger than he has been in the past, which is a good sign. Certainly won't hurt if he's asked to block. Outside of that, I'll be honest with you, none of the other tight ends really stood out to me, whether it be Jalen Conyers, Pharaoh Brown. But again, this is 4 practices out of however many they had. And then the structure of it. So I don't know what happens to the Dolphins. What do they do at tight end if they wind up trading Jonnu Smith? And Julian Hill's the other one. What do they do at tight end? Is it tight end by committee? Do they go out and get a tight end? Interesting question. I
don't think there's anyone to get. I don't know if you've taken a peek at the free agent tight end list. Yeah. It's not great. I think they just roll with it. I really do. I'm not saying that that's like great, but I think you put Tanner Connor and Jalen Conyers in the Jonnu Smith role. You funnel targets elsewhere. You throw those guys, not even a third, maybe like a quarter of the Jonnu Smith reps. And then, Pharaoh Brown and Julian Hill are blocking tight ends. I wouldn't expect them to perform well in a period where there's no pads. Frankly, I don't really care how they perform in a period where there's no pads. I just want to see those guys with pads and whether or not they can block, because that's going to be their role. So, I think I don't know if you feel like they could trade for another tight end to replace Jonnu. They trade Jonnu and then they trade a couple picks for a veteran or something else. But like the free agents are not great. I think they just roll with it if they move Jonnu.
No, I tend to agree there. And like you said, some of his targets go maybe more to Tyreek and Jalen Waddle after last year, where their numbers dipped a little bit, maybe to Nick Westbrook-Akine, maybe to Malik Washington, who to me was the one wide receiver other than Jalen Waddle, but Jalen Waddle shined mostly in 7-on-7 drills. And Jalen Waddle, who's beep fast against number one, 7-on-7 against a secondary with basically all guys who need to show that they can be, NFL starter level players. Not exactly surprising. So Malik Washington's a guy who I really like the way he looked. Nick Westbrook-Akine was very silent. Most of the practices, he had one day where they were doing red zone work and he caught some passes. Also said he was battling some sort of injury. Don't know what it was, but he was still practicing. Obviously nothing of significance. Otherwise he wouldn't have been out there. I still think he's going to be a valuable addition. Moving over quickly as we wind down to defense again. I don't pay attention to the trenches until the pads come on. So sorry, I can't give you much of a report on Jonas Savaiinaya or Kenneth Grant. The edge, if you're quick off the edge, these practices are designed where you're going to shine it. So to that end, obviously Chop had his moments. Bradley Chubb had his moments. The one guy who again shined to me, who did last year as well in training camp until he got hurt in the preseason, that's Grayson Murphy. I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. If you were to tell me right now Grayson Murphy makes the roster over Mohamed Kamara, I would tell you I can see that. I can buy that. There's nothing I see, again, with the same caveat as always, there's nothing I saw from Mohamed Kamara to tell me, yeah, he's in for a big jump in year 2. So I don't know. So in the secondary, which is obviously a big area of concern, the one guy I noticed the most probably was Kendall Sheffield, who was the guy the Dolphins signed after his rookie minicamp tryout. Veteran, spent some time with the Falcons, with the Jets. He was on receivers, made few plays on the ball, which was impressive. Storm Duck did some good work as well. Among the younger guys, Isaiah Johnson, who's a guy I've mentioned as a long shot, as a potential starter if the Dolphins don't wind up acquiring a veteran. At safety, trying to think, Dante Trader Jr. made some plays. He looked encouraging as a rookie 5th-round pick. I will say that. Jason Marshall Jr., another rookie 5th-round pick. Didn't notice him very much, which could be a good thing, meaning his coverage was so good nobody threw in his direction. This is where not being privy to the film or watching the all 22, I go by what I saw, immediate reaction. Like I said, I didn't notice him one or the other. And Ashton Davis is just completely cut, which kind of surprised me because I didn't remember him thinking he had that kind of body when he played for the Jets. He seemed to be like more lean. But I do this built strong. So in terms of, like, again, off-season program impressions from where I sat in the bleachers at the Baptist Health Training Complex on the grounds of Hard Rock Stadium, that's pretty much what stood out to me. If you were to predict, Dante, as we wrap this up, who are your starting cornerbacks in 2025?
Man, all right. So Cater starts somewhere, right? Like, to be determined if that's the slot or the boundary. I think right now it's the boundary. I think he's a starting outside corner for you, which we could talk for 10 minutes whether or not that's his best spot, but I think that's probably where you get him right now. Man, I think you probably roll with Storm Duck and Kendall Sheffield right now. I think that's probably the top 3. I would say, like, Duck's probably 2. I think Sheffield might be 3. And if that's the case, I think maybe you put Cater in the slot, you put Sheffield and Duck outside, and you try to play a lot of zone and protect those guys. Like, I don't love that. I don't think that that's a particularly encouraging starting group, but Duck was okay last year. Like, he wasn't awful when he played. Like, he was all right, especially for a UDFA. Like, there's something to build on. Like, he can get better. You know, he's a younger player. So, like, I like the idea of giving him a shot. If you're going to not sign a veteran and you're going to go with this young group, Duck played last year and he was fine. You know, so, like, I'd like to give him a shot. Cater, I think Cater's a good CB3. The idea of him being a CB1 is not my favorite, but he's an NFL starter, so sure. And then everyone said that Sheffield was solid this week, and that's all we have to go off of. So those would be my top 3. I don't know if you have a different 3 to pull from.
No, if you were asking me, like, right now, based on what I saw at the offseason program, I think those would be your 3. I completely agree. I still think, and this is where I would caution Dolphin fans who might be thinking, well, this is their roster. We have a month until the start of training camps around the NFL. There's no need for urgency right now, so it's very possible nothing will get done until middle of July. Something could get done this week, but it's also possible nothing gets done until the middle of July. I still would be inclined to believe the Dolphins will bring in a veteran cornerback, whether it's Stephon Gilmore. I doubt Stephon Gilmore because I think he'd probably want to go to a contender. But whether it's Rasul Douglas, who maybe realizes I'm not getting the money I want to get after visiting a couple of teams, so let me, take what I can get, or Asante Samuel Jr. if the reports after his neck surgery come back positive. I guess Mike Hilton's another option to throw out there, but he's a slot guy. That means you sign him. Logically, you move Cater outside, where you and I think agree it's not his best spot, but that's a possibility. And by the way, in case anyone's wondering, what about Cam Smith? Again, without necessarily going over too many details or divulging things we cannot based on Miami Dolphins reporting policy, there's nothing I saw in the 4 practices I intended to suggest to me that Cam Smith's ready to make a big move in year 3. Very, very sadly, and again, a lot can change between now and the middle of July, but as it stands right now, I would pat down on expectations regarding him. So I would go with the same guys. You know what? That's going to wrap it up for this episode 518. My plan is probably to come back here on the All Dolphins podcast later in the week. Obviously, if there's breaking news, I will pop up with a video to analyze it. But count on something later in the week. between then, we'll have the Dolphins Collective with Dudley Durong, TD Finstock, Omar Kelly, and myself. Tuesday night, Thursday night. Read all our content. Mine, that of Dante Colonelli on Miami Dolphins on SI.com, where all the content is free and there's a lots of it. Do it. Check it out, please. And also with the podcast, like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Monday.